Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. As always, I'm joined by Dom.
Somewhere in Jamaica, Phil Spencer is sitting on a beach, sipping a pina colada, just thinking about 12 flops is more than 10. My work is done.
And for the first time since May of 2019, we have the co-host of the Trophy Room, Joseph, a.k.a. MrBadBit.
What's up? What's going on, guys? Pleasure to be here. And somewhere in a dark room, Shuhei Yoshida is yelling into a pillow. And also somewhere in a hopefully different dark room, Mark Cerny is collecting ears. So it's going to be a show.
Hopefully I did a good introduction. It's always strange for me, introducing people on the podcast that don't normally promote their last name, because I don't want to come out and say their full name or anything. So
yeah,
it's always tough there. I don't know if
it's always been weird. So I remember the first time that happened, I was like, oh, now people gonna find out where I live. But nah, people don't care. So yeah, you can call me Joe, you can call me MrBadBit. It don't matter.
Cool. I just am always hopeful that I do a decent enough introduction for people on the show.
Yeah.
So let's hop into the rundown. We're going to cover a couple of small stories first, and then we're going to get into both the big Xbox Series X info dump that happened on this last Monday, which was March 16th. And then the following day, we had the Road to PlayStation 5 presentation by Mark Cerny, which we'll also get into. And then at the end, we'll obviously be comparing what we know about the two systems. I want to preface real quick by saying the conversations we'll have at that point and this shouldn't have to go with, this should be implied at this point in 2020, but we're not trying to console war it. This isn't like toxic fanboy culture. It's literally about two competing pieces of hardware that are going to, be going against each other in the open market. So you kind of want to compare them and see what they're going to offer consumers, right? So this isn't a Xbox versus PlayStation. Who's better, So just throwing that out there to let everyone know.
Pitchforks out. Get your weapons. We're going to war here, or begun. The console war's hot.
You can compare things, two different products, and have it not be a end all be all as to one is absolutely, the winner. So, just wanted to preface this whole conversation with that. Should be known, but there's kids out there that don't know any better. First up, the first thing on the rundown: Sabotage Studio, which you're familiar were the developers of The Messenger. Recently announced Sea of Stars, and this game is a turn-based RPG inspired by classics. Specifically, in an interview released this morning by Easy Allies, they talked about their three main sources of inspiration for this game are Golden Sun, Super Mario RPG, and Chrono Trigger, which is a pretty good trilogy. Three different games to have as your inspiration for the game. And it's a prequel to The Messenger, so anybody who played that game, the awesome platformer with amazing music, and loved the world, loved the comedic elements of it, this takes place thousands of years before that, but in the same universe, which is really cool. Did either of you guys get a chance to see this trailer today that dropped?
No, I'm watching it right now as we speak, and it looks really cool. I've never played Chrono Trigger or Golden Sun, but I get that vibe immediately from the art style alone.
It's beautiful. Sabotage is really good at pixel art. They're very good at the music they put into their games, and they're really good at taking the tropes and just kind of things that hold back these old school genres in the modern age, right? For modern audiences' gaming preferences. They do a good job of kind of turning those on their head and making fun of those things and being very self-referential. The thing I will say is they already put the flag in the sand saying this game is coming out in 2022. Thankfully, they're not trying to overpromise. A lot of times, game announcements will say they're coming out a lot earlier, and then they end up getting pushed. So they already know it's going to take a while. This game's actually only been in development for a couple of months. So watching the trailer, it's kind of astounding the level of detail the gameplay they've shown has.
Yeah, I'm watching the trailer right now, and it looks like, they're showing a lot of gameplay. Like, if you told me this was coming out next month, I'd believe you.
Yeah. The first time I saw it, it gave me Project Octopath Traveler vibes, not in the sense it looks the same or it's going to be the same gameplay, but I was immediately influenced by the art style, right? It was just purely beautiful, and I'm like, oh god. And then you see the actual gameplay and it looks interesting, so it's a nice melding of both. The Kickstarter went live today, and they had a target of $90,000. It already passed that. So it's at $96,000 and growing. They had a really cool thing where, so the initial perk for Kickstarter was $1, and it just like support the game. In order to buy the game digitally, it was like $24, right? And obviously you got a lot of other perks, including like digital wallpapers and your name in the credits. Because of the current situation we're in, they also offered one for I think like $17 or $18 for a limited number of people, of like, hey, we understand the circumstances now. If you're an early adopter, you can get it for cheaper than we were actually looking for initially. So that's really cool. It's no surprise that this game made its Kickstarter goal. Like you guys said, you saw the trailer and immediately were like, whoa, you know? So it's very visually impressive, and this game will find a great home on all platforms, but this to me reads Switch. Like I really hope this comes to Nintendo Switch, at least day and date with the other consoles, if not first. It just looks amazing. There's nothing else to really say there. Good studio. Oh, one other thing I wanted to add. This was actually intended to be their first game they wanted to make, but they understood that this was a large undertaking, so they wanted to take on a genre that was a little bit more simple and they can get out the door, right, to have kind of security in terms of funding. So that's why they focused on the Messenger, got that out, and then came back to this. But this was always originally intended to be like their project they wanted to make. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
it looks beautiful. It also, like the at least the banner also kind of gives me a bit of like Steven Universe vibes somehow, some way. Maybe it's a color palette that they use, but like it's definitely up my alley. This is something I'm interested in. It's also interesting how again in the front page of Twitter it says PC and consoles, so we can assume what that means. You know,
yeah,
that's cool.
Another thing is in the preview that Easy Allies posted, great outlet if you have a chance to check them out. They talked about how when I mentioned Sabotage Studio and how they like to, tackle the tropes and weird setbacks that these genres have. There's this weird thing with turn-based RPGs and just RPGs in general of this time period where you would go and buy like a very expensive weapon from blacksmith, right, for like 20,000 gold, and then that blacksmith is still like poor, so it doesn't really make sense contextually in the narrative of the game. And they also thought that it was dumb that in RPGs oftentimes it was like, oh, the more north you go, the better weapons and armor you get. So they kind of want to tackle that where it kind of makes sense in world how you're acquiring these items. They said you won't have multiple items to like upgrade to, and they just kind of want to tackle all of those RPG tropes that make no sense when you sit back and really think about them. And they also want to eliminate hardcore grinding in their game. So they really want to balance the experience that way people aren't forced to grind like you often are, in turn-based RPGs. So it's very interesting. Like we said, 2 years away. But God, it's going to be 2 years. I'm going to be refreshing that trailer and getting any update I can because that game looks gorgeous.
Awesome.
Next up, so that was an indie game. We got some rumors on a big AAA boy. This will technically be the second Call of Duty game released in 2020 if you're counting Warzone. Rumors have surfaced for the second release for Call of Duty, though their annual holiday release, that it will be a Black Ops reboot similar to the Modern Warfare reboot that we got in 2019, and it'll have story elements similar to the original but with a new storyline. Alex Mason and Frank Woods, who are the lead protagonists of the first Black Ops, will be set to return. Another note to this is that there was already rumblings that this year's Call of Duty was going to be Black Ops 5, and the reason that was, and you're thinking to yourself, wasn't this, Sledgehammer's year? Jason Schreier broke some news, I think mid to late in 2019, that Sledgehammer and Raven were working together on 2020's title, but for some reason they were just having issues internally working with each other and figuring out the workflow process. So basically Activision stepped in, had Treyarch step in, and they took the shell of that game and we're turning it into a Black Ops title. And it was assumed to be Black Ops 5 for this year, but these current reports, well, not really reports, rumors now are saying, no, it's a reboot instead. I guess from you guys, do you think this kind of makes sense that they would take the reboot approach again if these rumors are true? And to that point as well, what do you think this means for Warzone? Do you think if it is a Black Ops title this year, does Warzone get updated, or is it a Blackout version 2 in spring of next year?
Oh,
Call
you go.
I mean, I don't really have anything. I'm just this past year especially, I've just been getting exhausted on like all the Call of Duty news. The way it's like, because there was that big Jason Schreier report that you talked about the way they're organizing their studios is kind of a bit in flux lately, and they're having some struggles where that typical rotation that they had got down, like 3 studios each year. Every studio releases a game, so you had this great 3-year dev cycle more or less. Everything was flowing great, and now it seems, I don't know. Now there's Battle Royale. We have the Blackout Battle Royale, which I already forgot about until shortly after this Warzone Battle Royale came out. Like, oh yeah, they already did this, and then I even speculated, Jared, if you remember, maybe Warzone is all they're putting out this year because their studios are consolidated and they need more time or something. But apparently that doesn't seem to be the case. I'm just exhausted by it, I guess. I don't know. Just hearing about it.
I kind of had figured that this was going to be the case once they announced Modern Warfare. I was just like, oh, okay. So the World War II thing obviously didn't pan out the way that they wanted to. There was already quickly, some quick fatigue once it hit. People didn't.
But Joseph, you didn't like getting loot boxes on Normandy?
No, yeah. God, I remember that. I remember the days. But yeah, to me, I wasn't a fan of Blackout. It was a mode that I got in and out of pretty quickly within the month's end. But seeing Modern Warfare drop and release, I was just like, so their plan is re-release these titles, have the people that are nostalgic about them come back while they try to maybe get a third title somewhere down the line that is going to be different from these two series. To me, I love Warzone. I'll talk about that later into what we've been playing, but I really do think it's going to be a Fortnite situation where they're going to essentially break the world and add a new one in there. Or just a different map for Blackout or Black Ops, whatever they're going to call it. That's what I think is going to happen. It's going to happen the same way we saw probably with how Warzone dropped. It'll be probably a few months after the game's released, and then it reinvigorates the fan base and people come back in the new year when there's nothing much to play.
Yeah, and it kind of takes the place of where Call of Duty would normally in the past drop their big DLCs. Over the years, we've seen that people are kind of opposed to that kind of method where I don't want to pay for another, $20 or $30 DLC later in the year for a game I already own. And with Modern Warfare, it has free DLC, right? So they couldn't go and add an expansion later that costs money because then that would go against everything they kind of marketed with that game. So it made sense it came out with the free Battle Royale. And to your point, I said this last week when we were talking about the actual announcement of Warzone, Joseph, is that I'm with you. I think it's a platform. I think it's going to get updated, whether that be, like you said, the Fortnite style of blowing up the map and making something entirely different, or maybe a secondary map, who knows. But I think it's their platform moving forward that will be updated on an annual basis in that spring time zone. So we'll see. It's, to your point, Modern Warfare and Black Ops are their most popular franchises by far, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're going to remake any of them, remake those. No one's looking for, World at War remake. Well, I guess maybe some people are for classic zombies. But yeah, who knows? I believe that it is a Black Ops title. A reboot makes sense. A lot of this makes so much sense that it makes the rumors even more questionable, because sometimes when rumors make too much sense, you're like, did somebody, sit there and think about this that way nothing would be questioned because it just all makes too much sense. But
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
So what do you figure they call it then? So the game last year, right, was just Modern Warfare, which was similar to the basically a reboot of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, right? But that was easier to rename because you just dropped the 4, and it's different enough but similar enough that you can kind of send that message. So, but for Black Ops, what do you call this reboot? It's not going to be 5. You just Black Ops.
Yeah, I think it'll just be Call of Duty Black Ops. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
If they're willing to do that with, think about this, they were willing to do that with Modern Warfare like 2 years after they remade the original. Remember? So it's like I don't think they care at this point. They're just like, yeah, those names have so much cachet. People don't care if it has a number at the end. They just like that property. So it's like, yeah, whatever. It's just so funny because at one point people were wondering, how can this Call of Duty franchise keep going? And they're at Activision. They're like, you guys don't even know. We're going to come to a point. We're just going to run it all back. We're just going to run it all back from the beginning. And it's working because people are nostalgic.
It's crazy to think about what they've done here. Because I used to always think it was ridiculous. Like, Final Fantasy 15. And you're like, how in the hell are there 15 of those games? Like, that's crazy. Yeah. It's so silly that they have numbered titles that high. But different conversation. But that's 15 or however many. There's some in between without numbers too. But that's that many games over a few decades, right? Whereas there's probably 15 Call of Duty games over 1 decade or something. Or I don't know what the numbers are, but they've been able to pump out so many games that each sells so much in like so little time. Even though they're having some struggles now, it seems they're still like able to do it. In addition to like putting out good seemingly battle royales that can compete with Apex and Fortnite and stuff. We can shit on Activision all day about like their corporate practices and things like that, but like at the end of the day, like damn, like they bring in some bank on this stuff. Like, they got the right idea.
The only studio that can top them and publisher is 2K and Rockstar, right? So it's like they're the only ones that outsell them on an annual basis when those big titles come out, the Red Dead Redemption 2s and the GTA 5s of the world. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with Call of Duty Black Ops or if it ends up being 5, but that is later down the road. Now it's time to hop into this Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 information. There's quite a bit to go through. So I piecemealed it out as best as I can. We'll try to handle this in segments, but be warned, there's a lot here to go through. Some of it's really interesting, some of it's like kind of interesting, some of it's not really interesting, but I got all of for Xbox specifically, we already had information in the past about a lot of the specs, so I kind of didn't want to go over those again, right? The GDDR2 and all that stuff. I kind of only wanted to focus on the new stuff that was presented on Monday via not only Xbox officially, but both Digital Foundry and this really cool tech YouTuber I didn't know about until Monday. His name's Austin Evans. He did a really good, almost half an hour video.
About that guy?
Yeah, I'm more of a Marquise Brownlee person on YouTube.
Cool. Okay, he's good too, yeah.
MKBHD. Yeah, nothing against Austin Evans. I just didn't know about him. But yeah, he did a really solid 28-minute video. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out, where he got hands-on. Microsoft invited him over and the guys from Digital Foundry to, check out the Xbox Series X, and they even had a little cool kit where they could take apart the unit itself and put it back together.
I loved that shot. I saw that where they like kind of puzzle piece the pieces back together and then just slide it all into the case. That was sweet.
It was smart. Yeah. They put little magnets on each of the pieces too, so that way they fit in nicely. You don't have to obviously worry about screws or anything. Anyways, let's find out what we learned, right? So the first thing, quick resume. We already knew about this, but when we covered this on the show, Dom, we talked about how, oh, cool, you could quick resume like 2 games because currently it's only 1 game, right? We downplayed that. Our minds were too small. We didn't think about the possibilities. So recorded demo showcased that quick resume will allow players to jump into multiple games at suspended save points, and the number of games suspended can get as high as 5 titles depending on how intensive they are on the system. It works through system updates, restarts, and even unplugging the console. So I wanted to get to this point real quick where it says the number of games suspended can get up to as high as 5 depending on how intensive they are. So the demo they showed, it was Forza, State of Decay, Hellblade, The Cave, which is a 360 backwards compatible title, and some other 360 game. And you're able to get up to 5 games that way because 3 of them were kind of intensive and 2 of them obviously weren't intensive at all. the way they made it sound is if it's maybe 3 Xbox Series X games or 4 Xbox Series X games, that's all it can handle, right? Depending on if it's like your 4s or 5s or if you're playing, the Xbox Series X version of Inside, right? That'll be different levels of intensity. This is really cool. I've seen a lot of journalists and pundits talking about how this isn't really useful to them because they're the type of people who, when they turn on their console, they're only going to be playing one game and they don't hop around, right? And I completely understand that. But for people who play the Call of Duty Warzones or the Apex Legends or the Fortnites or even sports titles, right? Games that you hop in for a game or a match or two and hop out, to have those loaded up and ready to go alongside maybe that meaty single-player title you're playing alongside that is huge.
Man, you know what else? I saw someone else point out the other use case, which is not me either, is like you have 3 brothers and then, parents, and everyone's been playing a different game at different times, and it's like you can easily switch, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of hard to picture, but I think that could be really cool for like a group of people playing different games in the same box.
Spoiler alert, this is actually the coolest thing I saw about the Xbox. Because like Austin Evans, who did, I think, the better breakdown, because it was more in English. At least I understood a lot of it. It was just like, it'll just save. It'll be, it'll just save in the background. You don't have to worry about it. It's going to be there for you. And that's awesome. As a person who... look, I don't play 5 games at a time, but I do bounce between 1 or 2. That's pretty useful to me. It saves me a little bit of time for sure.
And for somebody like me who achievement hunts from time to time, I would like to have that 3rd or 4th game that, I feel like actually trying to get some of the achievements in that title and I don't have to worry about loading it, right? So maybe we aren't going through, like you said, 4 to 5 games at a time, but it's cool to have some on the back burner that are already loaded that you can go to when you feel like it, right? So,
like I on Xbox, I play Battlefront, Apex, and Call of Duty at the moment, and like, oh my god, that loading screen when you hit for Battlefront 2 is so long, and so if I could just avoid that, if I could avoid Apex's loading screen, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I mean, I think more news on that is about to come too.
Yeah. You know which one I'm excited for? Not having to load GTA 6 over and over again. That's one I'm going to have preloaded and saved and ready to go, because, God, those Rockstar loading screens. Boy, howdy.
Oh, God, yes.
This is something that, it's not going to be a wow thing, but to people who do hop back and forth, it is huge. And it's one of those, like, gamer features that I think, and we'll get to this later, I don't want to dive into it super, but PlayStation is kind of missing at this point now, right? Where it won't make a huge effect, but it's something like fans can point to and be like, hey, this is something cool that this console will have, right? So, props to Quick Resume. Did you have something to say, Joseph?
No, other than like Quick Resume, great feature. It's not going to sell me on a console though.
Exactly. Yeah. So loading times. This is also something that was shown off in both Digital Foundry and Austin Evans videos. They had State of Decay 2 up, and both people on separate systems, one on the Xbox One X and one on the Series X, both started State of Decay 2 at the same time. The Xbox One X took around 50 seconds to a minute to load fully, and within 8 seconds, the Series X was already loaded in and playing. It was really funny to see a side-by-side, because the guy on the Series X started up, was starting to play, doing a bunch of stuff in the game by the time the person on the other seat was able to load in. So a really neat comparison of the loading times. Odd that they chose State of Decay 2 among all titles, but it proved what the system is capable of in terms of increased loading times.
I think it's because there's just that game's so notorious for having extremely long load times. I don't know about you guys. I was actually not impressed by this. I maybe I sound crazy, but like seeing the PlayStation 5's loading of Spider-Man, where it's just like, hey, the shaky cam footage that we saw last year, where they visited 6 or 8 locations in Spider-Man, fast traveled there in 0.9 seconds. And so I was just like, I was just like, I'm not impressed. So like seeing that, I was just like, it's cool. We're getting there. I think what Microsoft's doing is like, hey, let's shorten load times. And we'll talk about the power in a sec. but like we don't need to eliminate them. Developers will find the shortcuts where it'll feel like you're eliminating them. Where PlayStation, it feels like it's gone.
Yeah, well, and the difference there too is that, nothing against the guys at Undead Labs, but Insomniac Games, I think, have a lot more experience in the game development side, and a lot more experience specifically working with Sony. So I think they're able to push that thing and get it going and all that. Undead Labs, it's already a game that was like Spider-Man loading times weren't terrible. State of Decay loading times are terrible. That's to me why atrocious. That's why I'm more surprised that I would have loved to see what this could do to a true first party title, right? Like a Halo Infinite or a Gears 5. Okay. That would impress me more, because then if it was way faster, then we could have compared it to Spider-Man. But I am with you. The shaky cam footage we saw was super impressive. I can't wait to see that in full motion in 1080p when they actually sell us on that. It's going to be really cool. Yeah. Next up, ray tracing. Obviously, this is one of the new hot button terms that you hear thrown around for next gen systems. They showed a test build for Minecraft on the Xbox Series X. I think this was a good call personally, because it is such a simplistic game that if you can show what ray tracing can do to a title like this, you can kind of,
imagine
exactly what it'll do to the AAA big boy titles. And for me, the improvement in game was crazy. Like the visuals and the lighting, they had a really cool toggle feature where the content creators could show you like, hey, this is, Minecraft that yada, yada, yada. And this is it with ray tracing and the lighting work it does, the reflections, everything. One thing that I wish they did go into with the ray tracing was the audio side of it. Obviously, it won't be too impressive with Minecraft on that end. But overall, in terms of the lighting and everything else that ray tracing can provide a title, seeing Minecraft displayed like this, like I kind of actually want to hop back into Minecraft on the Xbox Series X when it comes out, if it's capable of running this that I showed in the tech demo.
Now, apparently, when it comes to ray tracing as well, they have machine learned ray tracing.
Yep.
Which affect and now I lied because I remembered it. This is actually the coolest feature. And this will sell console. Like to me, this makes me want to buy an Xbox One X. Or Series X rather, sorry, because of that machine learned ray tracing. Microsoft's doing an amazing job of saying the history of your titles, of your gameplay matters. And this is an amazing feat for game preservation, because the one thing that so many other gamers, we want to go back and revisit those games of old, but it's not just the mechanics. You go try to play Shadows of the Empire and it looks rough. So having it where like the Series X is going to bump things that get bumped, the Xbox One X did with previous titles of bumping them all at least up to 1080p and I think 60 FPS, at least 1080p, I know that. But then having this added on top of it, awesome feature. This is a killer feature.
The next thing that you kind of touched on there was the backwards compatibility. Obviously, at this point that all of your accessories are going to move forward. They kind of wanted to double down and let you know that is still the case. All your controllers will work, and your entire library will be available on day one, which is huge. So that's your Xbox titles, your 360 titles, and your Xbox One titles that have already all been available through backwards compatibility.
And your Game Pass titles.
And to Joseph's point as well, they stated that those back-compatible games will also see improved boot times, stable frame rates, higher resolutions, and improved image quality. Another thing that they mentioned was it'll allow for cross-gen multiplayer. So like the Rainbow Six Sieges of the world or the Fortnites, you'll be able to play if you have an Xbox Series X with people who have, the Xbox One and yada yada. So that's huge too, because a lot of times, maybe not so much as we get older, us three, but I remember as, a youth growing up and your group of friends figuring out what everyone was going to do in terms of the next console, right? And when is everybody going to upgrade? When is, and this is cool because it doesn't force anybody in the friend group to feel like they need to make an investment before they actually can or feel comfortable with that. And the fact that they can still continue playing a lot of those multiplayer games together is really, really nice. So, yeah. Next up, this was also mentioned in the backwards compatibility section of controllers. There's a new controller. It's pretty much the same thing with a few different form factor changes. So first of all, it features a D-pad similar to that found on the Elite 2 the Elite Series 2 controller, which is like an inverted dome. So it has the 4 directional buttons and then these like interconnected webs between that allow for easier diagonal movement. The one on the Series X, the Elite Series 2 is incredible. So I'm interested to see how the cheaper plastic version of it feels in comparison to like the metal one on the Series 2.
I'm gonna be real. I hate it. I don't mind the D-pad. I have the Series 2.
Yeah.
And I don't mind it, but I really need to get this controller in my hands. Like, first off, they designed it. I believe they said like they have like an 8-year-old hand in mind, which I don't care if they slim it down. It doesn't even look like it could lose a little weight, but like, fine. If it's gonna feel good, I don't care. The triggers, I like those. It's the D-pad that very much concerns me, of like how platformers are going to feel. It kind of feels like we're taking a step back into the 360 days for that type of D-pad.
Yeah, like I said, I'll be interested to see how it feels in comparison. I love the Series 2 one, but we could both end up finding ourselves both disliking this one because it is a cheaper manufactured version of it, right, with the plastic, so it might be mushy, who knows. The other improvements to the controller, or who knows if they're improvements here, changes. They added more slight curvature to the bumpers, so they're not so rigid and straight across. They added a share button to the front, which we've seen with the Switch and both the DualShock 4. This kind of same thing. And they added textured grip slightly to the bumpers and pretty substantially to the triggers. They also mentioned reduced latency for the controller, which is kind of something they covered in their original info dump a while back via Phil Spencer's blog post. And lastly, it'll still use AA batteries, and it'll work with any current, charge packs you have, plain charge packs, cool, for your current controllers as well. So there's that. Anything else you guys want to mention about the controller? Good to move on?
Yeah, I'm good.
Controller.
Storage. It'll come with an internal 1 terabyte SSD and will allow players to expand their storage via proprietary external SSDs in partnership with Seagate. Price is currently unknown. Currently, you can get SSDs that are external for anywhere from like $75 to $200. It just depends. So we don't have any specific price, but it won't be cheap. And the way they explained it is that, your Xbox Series X games can be stored on a regular non-SSD external hard drive, but they can't be played from that drive. Yep. They have to be on the SSD or a SSD in order to be played, to match kind of what the system itself is trying to do. In terms of all your previous gen games, that being 360, original Xbox, Xbox One, those can be stored and played from a regular non-SSD external hard drive. This is it sucks that it's proprietary, but when they actually get into why it needs to be proprietary and why it needs to match up with what they're doing, it makes sense. Sony kind of went into this, and we'll get into this in a little bit, of they're not labeling it as proprietary, but the more Mark Cerny talks about it, it's like we need to approve a very specific type of SSD that's going to be able to fit in it. Yeah. It won't be as proprietary as the Xbox, but it's going to be pretty limited, I'd assume, because they want the system, the hardware, the internals to function the way they want them to, right? And using something that they don't approve can really alter the performance of the games on that machine. So it makes sense. But
this one's a give and take. First, I don't like it's proprietary on the Xbox. That is just them trying to mark it up so that they're getting an add-on purchase from you one way or the other. That's how I'm seeing it. But it is a give and take when it comes to PlayStation. I liked how Mark Cerny actually explained their memory situation, because I feel like both of the storage is not great. But I like how Mark Cerny said it is so it's not proprietary, but there are certain ones that they'll pretty much give you in a blog post, and it's not something, it's not like a memory card like on the Xbox. It is something you're putting into the board. Yeah. Just like of PlayStations of old. So they're saying, hey, listen, it's, you might have to, it's kind of alluding that it's going to look kind of like a traditional console, how the PlayStation 4 top kind of lifted off. You're going to have a external port. You get to put the memory into the board. But again, I'm losing track here. The point is that they're doing that so that your storage is as fast and as close to the chipset as possible, so that you're getting the fastest speed. And so
Exactly,
the
yeah.
Xbox, again, we're seeing this narrative being woven here. Xbox is fast, just not as fast. But yeah.
With the memory transfer speed and the bandwidth. So the internals, we already talked about this at the top, where they showcased all of the individual parts and had people putting them together and how the cooling would be handled. There's actually a little stand at the bottom of the Xbox Series X that we hadn't really seen before. At least I hadn't. It's like a little circular stand that it sits on, so air can circulate through the bottom as well. It hasn't. I could have sworn I hadn't seen it before Monday in terms of like anything they'd shown. But yeah, and then they obviously showed the fan, and one of the cool things is, like most of their consoles, PlayStation does this as well. There was hidden Easter eggs inside of it, and one of them is a cool little Master Chief sticker thing on the fan unit itself, which is cool. Obviously, don't open it to look at yourself, but it's cool to know that thing's in there. Yeah, I really hope PlayStation does something similar to the thing that Austin Evans and Digital Foundry got to do, where they put it together. I just think it's always cool when like you separate the parts. And it's like adult Legos, you know. I just think it's so awesome.
Apparently, so and as a PlayStation guy, I'll cut in here for just a second. Apparently, that was the case. I think Digital Foundry briefly alluded to it, and it was confirmed later that Sony was supposed to stop by. But because they were supposed to visit Sony's offices, but because of I don't know if this is put onto YouTube, so I can't say it, or else YouTube will flag it. But because of the
Go ahead. Don't
all
worry.
right, cool. Because of the coronavirus, they couldn't travel, and so what we're walking into right now, when it comes to the PlayStation side, is a tangle of webs.
Yeah,
and a lot of it isn't their fault. So yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's a circumstantial product of, timing. So yeah, next up we're going to be going over the PlayStation 5 stuff, which was labeled as the Road to PS5. On Wednesday, March 18th, the PlayStation had a pre-recorded live stream initially intended to be their GDC presentation before the event was canceled due to the coronavirus. Mark Cerny presented a 52-ish minute talk diving deep into the technical approach they had when designing the PlayStation 5.
And can we say off the bat, more than anything, it really showed that this was intended to be a GDC presentation that got canceled and then thrown together.
Yeah, for sure. The weird like Mystery Science Theater setup is like
the silhouette of the people in the audience.
That's my direct comparison. Every time it's brought up, it's like, this is a Mystery Science Theater shit that we're seeing right now.
And the thing I wanted to talk real quick is, you guys want to get into our feelings on the presentation before or after we get through what was actually talked about? You want to do that before or after?
Before, because get it out of the way.
Let's get it out of the way. Yeah,
It was silly. So, it was uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I want to talk about it real quick. So I want to break this up in little parts. First of all, Mark Cerny, very intelligent man, knows what the hell he's doing, can explain some of the most specific and technical and complicated things to you in a way that is probably the most digestible that stuff can be, right? The talk itself, like you said, was meant to be at GDC. I completely understood that going in. I was not, my expectations were set normally, but the thing is that these things don't happen in a vacuum, right? If it did, this presentation would have been fine, cool. It didn't happen in a vacuum. In the current situation we're in, not only with the coronavirus, but with the state of the information we know about the PlayStation 5, people online right now have nothing to do but look to the internet for entertainment, right? And even though PlayStation marketed this as what it was, right? I look at the architecture of the PlayStation 5. People, they do this with Nintendo Directs as well. They just hyped it into hoping it could be something that it wasn't going to be. And I do think that PlayStation could have read the room a little bit better and understood that now that the coronavirus has affected what's going on in our day-to-day lives, I think they could have maybe changed some things to make it go a little bit better for the circumstances they found themselves in. Like I said, though, that being said, they marketed it correctly. I went in with proper expectations, but yeah, this not happening in a vacuum related to everything else, I do think it was if you had to go thumbs up, thumbs down, I would say thumbs down. But yeah, that's just my.
So like, had GDC not been canceled, like would this have been a YouTube video? Like
this would have probably been uploaded on GDC's side, I'd assume. But
either GDC side or their side, but it would have had a strong focus on developers. This is for developers. This would not have been. I mean, well, I think either way, this would have kind of been a. I think with developers in the room, people, the defense of this is a developer show. For the common folk or for the fanboy, whatever you want, people would have been more understanding. But the fact that they went along with it anyway and live streamed it and how it was presented was bewildering. Like,
good word.
Jim Ryan gets up on stage and he's disheveled. He looks like they just woke him up.
That's true.
Like they caught him in a nap and they're like, Mr. Ryan, you're up next. He's shit. Okay. Hey, this, and like he says it so fast. Again, right now what Sony needs at the end of the day is someone that could look into a camera, talk into a microphone at the same exact time, and people like them. Because Jim Ryan has this very nervous energy about him that he's just not good on camera. So like he's there, he's just like, oh hi, this was supposed to be at GDC. It's not, but here it is anyway. All right, good day. And like you could tell that audience is fake. It's definitely fake. He's talking to no one.
It's on loop, yeah.
Yeah, and then Mark Cerny comes up, and the thing is, why couldn't they have this? I just don't understand this. Why couldn't they have them in a room, kind of like how Apple reveals an iPhone where Johnny Ive's sitting there and he's talking about aluminum, like, and have something on the corner showing what's happening, what they're trying to demonstrate. Because Mark Cerny is a genius. He talks like a genius, and he has the approachability of a genius, which means he's not very approachable. He can't sell me on something, right? And I was on a podcast prior, and Chris, and I got your name right, Chris. I forget where you're from, but you said something right where Sony was all show, no tell. All tell, no show. They told us what this thing's about, but they didn't show us anything. It's like going to a car lot. It's like or unveiling the new Ford Mustang and saying it goes 200 miles per hour, and then when people go, "Oh, cool, where's the car?" They're just like, "Oh, it's not here." And they're like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, just take a word for it." It's like we need to see some things. And so we got here, and even if you are a technical side, developers know how hard drives work. So why are we going into the fundamentals of how a hard drive works and breaking it down? There's so many mistakes here. If I was Shuhei Yoshida, and we all know he secretly runs all of PlayStation, why have at least 30 seconds of talking, going, "Hey, we understand what's going around the events of the world right now. COVID is here. We were planning on something, and because it is what it is, we wanted to still give out something for developers. So understand going in, we don't have any cool IP to show you. This is a technical deep dive of the capabilities of this console." Bam, done.
It's interesting too, the chicken or the egg before you go, Dom, of this whole situation where I wonder if Microsoft going on Monday and just shadow dropping all of this stuff, right? If it kind of forced Sony's hand in a way of like, maybe they were planning on dropping this a little bit later on. I'm not saying months, but like maybe weeks, right? To maybe get something better together, right? Than just this. But they figured like the more time they separate themselves from that, the worse it's going to look when they eventually show it. It's a very weird thing of how this all played out because GDC didn't happen, right? Of like, when was Microsoft originally intending to drop that info dump? Because they also had their stat conferences, right, that they replaced GDC with, that announced some new stuff as well. It just, this whole thing, like I said, it not happening in a vacuum. I think the Monday stuff with the content creators getting hands on it that PlayStation was able to do because of the circumstances kind of pulled the rug from underneath them. It just, wasn't a good look. Not a good first impression, or like I guess like third impression because of the Wired articles. Sorry, go ahead, Dom.
Oh yeah, no, it was weird. Like I said, it was kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, but Jim Ryan especially, right? That was just a weird intro. That
Looking like he woke up. It's so funny.
like I turned it on like what I assume was halfway through what he was saying, and then he just said it was just a little awkward. The whole thing was just like, this is weird. But I guess I don't know how much that matters. I guess I don't. I mean, I wouldn't think it does really at all. Personally,
I think in the moment it matters a lot. I mean, in the long term, when the console's actually released and everything, I don't think it matters at all. But in the current moment of like people being isolated and wanting all the news they can get, I think it matters a lot because people are going to ruminate on this, right? But like,
yeah, I guess. But the moment,
like whatever.
This moment, people are a little weirded out by it. But like, they're not trying to. The thing's not for sale in this moment. So I don't think it really matters because, we're gonna get the cooler presentations over throughout this year, right? Of like, oh, here's actual PS5 games and like here's the live demo of the loading and like we're gonna get all that sweet shit. I assume. Again, obviously, if we don't, then that's problematic.
Well, that's the worry, right? Is people are worried that this could be a Sony full of hubris, right? As we see with every other generation, one company just gets a little too full of themselves. And I'm not saying Sony is. I'm just saying this could be a telltale sign of that. I guess partially that's why some people are worried of that happening. And that's a tough thing, too, is that before this presentation happened, there was people from Blue Point talking about them being excited about it. I'm not bashing them for any reason, but the moment somebody from Blue Point talks about the thing that's happening the next day, people start thinking, oh, we're going to see Blue Point's rumored remake, whatever that is, showing off the tech, right? That doesn't happen. The fact that we didn't see the thing that Joseph brought up of like, show Spider-Man loading super quick. Like, it's the biggest strength PlayStation has right now is its games. And we didn't see any of that yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but but we will. That's why we're still a long way away before they're telling us to pre-order this thing even, right? So like, that's why I don't think it really matters yet that this wasn't.
In the grand scheme of things, I know where you're getting at, and I think you are totally right. But I do think this spooked Sony.
Yeah.
I do not think Sony. They did not think that the reaction was going to be so mixed. Now, again, the drunken haze from yesterday has faded, and it seems like now that the facts are trickling in that, oh, actually, this console, pretty dope. And, so we'll get into it, but like it's, Don, I think you're totally right, dude. It's something where it's, at the end of the day, this is a bump in the first mile that is the road to the PlayStation 5. And when we see the games, like, we could talk about the teraflops and how Xbox One X is more powerful than the PlayStation 4 Pro, but Ghost of Tsushima is one of the most beautiful games I've seen out of any console this generation. So there is an extent where we can circle jerk power specs all we want, where it does come down to the end of the day, games.
Yeah, we're running a little long, so we're not gonna. No, it's fine. We're not gonna speed through this stuff, but we'll be a little bit quicker about it. So first off, the specs for the PlayStation 5. The SSD will have more than double the transfer speed of the Xbox Series X. So the Xbox Series X has a transfer speed of 2.4 gigabytes a second, whereas the PlayStation 5 will have 5.5 gigabytes a second, which is pretty impressive. It'll get into that later. Total teraflops, 10.28 for the PlayStation 5. Obviously, the Xbox Series X has 12. That stuff is really not important, I think. It's just a marketing number. Next up. Same GPU architecture for both the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, that being the custom RDNA 2, and memory, which is the 16 gigabytes of GDDR2. One thing to clarify, the Xbox Series X will have a more powerful GPU and CPU than the PS5, but obviously it's not apples to apples because of the transfer speed for the memory. It's very weird. These consoles aren't like directly, mirrors of one another. There's some things they technically do different, but a lot of it is pretty much the same across the board, with the Xbox Series X taking a slight power advantage. Next up, storage. The PS5 will have an internal SSD with 825 gigabytes, and Cerny, kind of explained why this is needed for the specific setup they have. It's a very odd number, and it does suck just looking at that number, being like, man, you couldn't hit a terabyte, which kind of blows, but...
and then
The reason that's why is, I'm sorry to cut you off, but like, it's 125 is made for the system itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He explained it, and I totally get it. It just, normal consumer looking at a number, it's like, oh, that's not a terabyte. You know what I mean?
It's a weird number.
They'll have the allowance of expansion of memory. We kind of got into this on the Xbox side, so we don't need to go in too much. But the one thing I wanted to add is Cerny clarified that like the NVMe SSDs that they're looking for to be compatible that can match the 5.5 gigabyte a second transfer speed aren't really on the market right now. He expects it to be available by the end of the year, and he even mentioned that it'll be sometime after launch before they approve the ones you should buy. So like we said, not necessarily proprietary, but specified approval of certain ones.
And then the thing is too, like we can expect the Xbox Ones are going to be expensive by nature of being proprietary, but then these are going to be expensive too, just by nature of like the brand ass new, high spec SSDs. Because even though SSDs in general are getting cheap nowadays, these ones are going to be like a whole new level. So they're going to be at first, like after a few years, it'll start to settle down when there's more versions or more brands are putting them out and stuff. But both of these external, additional storage options are like, from that point of view, are not great. It's great from the point of view of, like we talked about, like making sure it matches what's in the system and everything. But
yeah, it sucks that both consoles kind of got shafted with this. Like, I shouldn't say shafted. They had to do it for a reason, right? Because it's
between
expensive.
A rock and a hard place.
Exactly. It sucks, but it is what it is. With PlayStation, people who buy the PS5 will have less memory, obviously, on board. So it's going to be interesting to see. Because I don't even know if Xbox clarified if the Seagate proprietary stuff will be available at launch. Did they? Now that I'm thinking about it, they obviously showed it off and said that you can buy them. But I don't know if they.
You could assume, but I still wouldn't put a price or a date on it. And considering what's going on right now, yeah.
And especially because like Sony didn't confirm it either, right? That there's a specific day, and they said well after launch. It'll be interesting to see how fast our SSDs fill up and how soon we can upgrade them. But like, I think all three of us have an external hard drive at this point, right? Like a non-SSD external, and I don't mind like
that's the thing.
moving games back and forth for the time being.
That was always my thing. I guess I'm in the minority. Like, I've been good with a terabyte.
Oh really?
I think I got over a terabyte quick.
But like, it's the same thing of, we already talked about like how many games you play at once, right? And it's a similar conversation where like, I'm pretty much playing one game, and then I'll delete it and then move on to the next one. I have a couple installed that I keep, but like, I'm pretty much just play a game, uninstall it. Like, I just beat Death Stranding, uninstalled it because I know I'm done with it, and so on. So like, I think I'm around like 700 some.
Okay.
But yeah, like, I don't know. That wasn't really a problem.
Also, that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Joseph. Sorry.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm the guest. How dare you? The guest is always right. No. The one thing that they did want to mention is games are going to be smaller-ish, sort of.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, because
the opposite might be true.
Yeah, right? Because how usually downloading a game works onto a standard hard drive is that there is a disk that spins in your hard drive, and it has to catch that data that it's constantly spinning at. And sometimes it misses. So sometimes things are copied over and over again, layer upon layer, so that it makes sure that when the disk spins and it hits the data it needs to, it hits it. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of layers just being taken off. It's just going to be one layer. And now what you can do is essentially, instead of when you see a big Call of Duty patch and it's like 96 gigs, that's because you got to re-download the entire file again. Now, file size is going to be a lot smaller. Updates are going to be a lot smaller. It's going to be megabytes, smaller gigabytes on top of the pre-existing layer.
And so this is something I was thinking about with storage, is that none of this has been confirmed or denied for PlayStation, but in Xbox's case, we know about smart delivery, right? So like, if I own Xbox, if I own Rainbow Six Siege 6, or okay, yeah. Sorry, I was having a brain fart.
I don't know.
So if I own Rainbow Six Siege 6 and
just Siege, just Siege,
Siege, sorry, Siege. if I go and download it on the Xbox Series X, I get the Xbox Series X version of that game, right? So I'm going to have to be downloading that size of files for it, right? So what I'm basically saying is that at launch for Xbox, you'll have a higher chance of filling up your storage because you're getting the smart delivery versions of those games. Whereas with PlayStation, I highly doubt there's going to be 10 launch titles for the PS5 that you're going to own at the same time. So you'll have less of a worry of filling it up at launch. You know what I'm saying? Because we don't know if they have smart delivery or not. So that's just a difference there. But yeah, all over the place in my brain. Next up, audio. So instead of Dolby Atmos, which Xbox currently supports with the Xbox One X, Sony's going for 3D audio. Basically, they're going to be using their Tempest engine that will support hundreds of sound sources. Mark Cerny went into this and described it as a learning process that will evolve the audio quality of PS5 games over time throughout the generation, and hinted at personalized profiles called HRTFs that can enhance an individual's audio experience. The PS5 itself will reportedly launch with 5 templates that you can sift through, and there's a little mini game that you'll be able to figure out which one works best for you specifically. And he said that their goal with the Tempest engine is to deliver great audio to everyone, not just those who own incredible sound bars or high-priced audio output devices. And also, he wants pictures of your ears. So,
yeah, man. I walked in on this part because I had to help bring my you know what? We're not gonna call them groceries anymore because we were living in the dark times. Supplies. He was on a supply run. I had to help him midstream, and let me tell you, I was kind of thankful at this point. And I came back, and he's just like, "We've been collecting ears." I'm like, "Whoa, what?" This is actually really cool. This is actually something that is going to be incredibly hard to market, and that's sad. But there's someone that I want to give a shout out to, and it's a developer who's working on Bleeding Edge, and he's just like, PlayStation 5 looks incredibly promising, and for the first time in a very, very long time, audio engineers are being taken seriously for what they do, because usually they're in the back of the line waiting for everybody else. Where you're talking about hearing individual rain droplets, that's really awesome. And when you're talking about not even just your headphones, and I'm a headset gamer, that's how I'm hearing, that's how I'm getting immersed, that's awesome. So, also having that translated to TV, awesome. A lot of the sound portions got me extremely hyped. This is what I want in gaming. Improve my gaming in ways that I wasn't thinking that I wanted. And that's what Sony is trying to do. It's trying to fill in the gaps and being different. So
my only concern is him talking about it being something that evolves over time. So obviously at console launches, Xbox will probably have something like this too. I'm not saying 3D audio for PlayStation will be this, but there's always stuff they talk about at launch that never really reaches its full potential throughout a console cycle, right? And I'm interested to see how far they take this, because if they do commit to it the way Mark Cerny's saying, it could be some incredible audio visual experiences we've never seen before. Yeah. And funny enough, this was the only thing we really got back behind the scenes looks at, right? When they showed the way they were
also,
testing.
I'm sorry if you hear my mother in the back. I told her to be very quiet. I told her, hey, could you just be a little bit respectful? Because we're all quarantined together and it's just a Hispanic household.
People want it now.
That's a problem.
Hey man, I'm half Hispanic. I know the struggle. Don't worry.
Yeah. Oh boy.
So lastly, backward. Actually, Dom, do you have anything to say about the audio?
No, this is one of those areas where I don't know much about audio, but I'm glad that people who like audio, like you guys, are high on it. So that's cool.
It's really impressive. I love the way they test it. Where the guy totally looked futuristic.
I was watching that okay, this is a big giant square with different colors.
That graphic was a terrible choice. The one with the photoshopping of putting it in Blade Runner and stuff was really funny. Lastly, real quick, backwards compatibility. This one was, obviously we don't have full clarification, but the way Sony handled all this with the mixed messaging and the confusion. So it seems that a good number of the top 100 played PS4 games will be available at launch, with more coming in the future. And nothing was mentioned in regards to the first 3 PlayStation consoles, despite having some weird accidental teases of leaving empty space when they're talking about the backwards compatibility. the reason people were confused is because in that segment, Cerny also talked about boosting games, right? The same way we've heard from Xbox. And it was unclear if he was saying like, oh, some of the top 100 played games will be boosted at launch, or if he was saying some of the top 100 played games will be available at launch. And it seems through Sony's and PlayStation's PR blast afterwards through text, it seems like it is the backwards compatibility and not the boosted necessarily. Still, they have a lot to clarify there. For all my PlayStation brethren out there, I hope it's fully backwards compatible, but people have to remember, like, it's awesome that Xbox is in this position now where their whole legacy and history is there, but that took years. Like, they didn't add all of the games at once, right? And that's what sucks with PlayStation is they kind of already are behind on the 8 ball, and now you're seeing that even once they first start doing it, it's not going to be all top 100 played games at launch because it is a process, right?
Yeah.
So they are behind the 8 ball in that sense, and they'll never really catch up, but it is going to take some time for them to get to a point where it is like a primary awesome thing to have. It just sucks that it's behind at this point, but
yeah. This was
your
embarrassing.
Incentive. Yeah, it was. I agree, it was embarrassing.
Go for
but
it,
like,
man. Sorry.
in addition to like their incentive is decreases obviously, right? Because they even, especially the way they describe this as the top 100 most played is what they started with, and you're like, okay, yeah, I get it, but that also means that like, you know, those bottom half or whatever, it might be a couple of years till they get around to making sure those work, if at all, right? Because what's the incentive for Sony at that point? It's like no one's playing these games anyway, so like, you know, where do they draw the line of like, all right, we got the top 500 playable, so then we stop, or you know what I mean?
And somebody like you who's not really into battle royales or multiplayer games in general, most of those top 100 played games are multiplayer titles. You know what I mean? So what are they going to prioritize for somebody like you? You know,
I think I'd be okay because even with that, I mean,
Bloodborne is a top 100 played. It has to be. You know what I mean?
If Bloodborne isn't, there is no God.
Right. Yeah.
If okay, listen, it's been 1,820 days since the launch of the original Bloodborne. And the fact that we haven't gotten a sequel should be a war crime. If this is not on the PlayStation 5, I will flip. You will see Joseph go full rage monster.
It sucks for a company that has such a strong legacy, like PlayStation not taking advantage of it, right? And obviously it's from a tech side, it's kind of hard for them to do. But then you look at Nintendo and it's like they're not really doing much on their side either with all of their legacy of, you know, very there's large gaps in time where they put like NES and SNES titles on the online service, right? Yeah. So it's funny that Xbox, who has the smallest legacy, is doing the most to keep that legacy going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's strange. Strange, but awesome for Xbox gamers.
Yeah.
You know? Sucks if you're a PlayStation gamer. Like this one, we do need clarification. It is all over the place, and it does seem like, it is... what they're doing right now is 100 at the start, and they will be adding more as time comes. And so cool, because let's be honest, half of those games are shovelware, right? A lot of it, like when you read, when you're preparing the drop each and every week on the trophy room, you see a lot of garbage.
I say you're garbage not stoked for Roblox on PlayStation 5, or Roblox coming to PlayStation 5.
A lot of it's just not even Roblox. A lot of it is just like, weird IO games, and so. Yeah, no, like, we don't need to waste our time with a lot of the backwards compatibility, but if you're getting the games that truly matter, like a Rainbow Six Siege, I think the most important thing that you mentioned earlier is smart delivery. Sony ain't being smart, and I'm afraid of their delivery, because I don't want to buy Rainbow Six again, or Overwatch again. You know what I mean? Like, well, I'll be doing that anyway. But like that's the thing that sucks about the PlayStation 5 so far, is it's giving me this worry that I'm gonna have to rebuy Cyberpunk 2077. I don't want to do that. I've already spent too much money.
In our current situation, people are gonna have a hard time buying consoles by end of the year, depending on how quickly things change, right? And for people who are on the fence, as it currently sits with the information we have, if you don't have a dedicated allegiance to one side or the other based on your profile history, right? Yeah. Xbox clearly has the added in value, top to bottom, as it sits. So it's kind of helping it lean towards that way because of the backwards compatibility, because of the smart delivery. Like, I now can buy Cyberpunk worry-free and know that I'll also be able to play it when I buy the new console, right?
Yeah.
It just sucks that we don't know if PlayStation will be able to do that or not. Before we close out and talk about what we've been playing really quickly, I wanted to go over some industry response to all of this. So according to Digital Foundry and other tech-focused content creators, it seems that despite having mostly similar specs, with the caveat that, Xbox Series X took the power crown overall, yada, 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 the approach is slightly different. PlayStation is opting for variable clock speeds, whereas Xbox is relying on a fixed approach to those clock speeds. There are advantages and drawbacks to both. I just wanted to show that, like, a lot of these people are saying, like, they're taking slightly different approaches, and each of them will have benefits and drawbacks. And I wanted to go over some stuff real quick in regards to a lot of the information from the industry. So first up, the backwards compatibility issue. Mitch Dyer, formerly of IGN, now at EA DICE, I believe, he basically tweeted to Shinobi on Twitter. If you don't know Shinobi, he tweets out a lot of the video game news in the industry. Really good follow on Twitter. He asked him anything about PS3, 2, or 1 games. Jason Schreier, the mole of the industry, breaking some of the craziest stories. He replied, Mitch, I would look at where those rumors came from in regards to backwards compatibility. Mitch replied, are there rumors? I'm just curious because I want it. And Jason Schreier broke everyone's heart and replied, oh, yeah, don't get your hopes up. So this was in relation to the confusion over whether they were the boosted or the backwards compatible games. Yeah, it sucks. Hopefully, maybe they change their stance in the future, but it doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it's going to be a thing on PlayStation 5 outside of PS4 games. Next up, Jason Schreier, who I just mentioned, gave his specific kind of reaction to the entire PlayStation 5 TED Talk that Mark Cerny gave. And he tweeted, seems like a bad marketing move to release a technical spec sheet that looks significantly worse than your biggest competitors, then put out an incomprehensible hour-long lecture video rather than showing actual game footage to demonstrate what makes your console unique. But hey, I shouldn't have to be the one saying this, but the PS5's SSD is a huge deal and could actually change the way games are designed. Meanwhile, gamers will just look at the side-by-side specs and believe the Xbox is superior. Sony's marketing couldn't have handled it any worse. Yes, which is, that's the thing is, like, the SSD thing is a huge deal, and it'll drastically affect games on the PlayStation 5. They didn't really do a good job of selling that overall, which sucks. There was another part here. Where was it? Okay, not on this thread. Sorry, I have a bunch of these open that I wanted to get through. So
same here. Don't worry about it.
So John Linneman, who's one of the main guys over at Digital Foundry, this isn't really important at all. I just thought it was a little bit of a nice addition to this whole thing. He posted a poll saying, now that the specs are out for both consoles, what are your thoughts? And the options were PS5 has the advantage, Xbox has the advantage, they're about the same, and then a joke answer of Sega Mega Drive is better. And as it sits, the poll is at 50% for Xbox, 11% for PlayStation, and 16% for they're the same. So I thought that was interesting because on one hand, it's like the people following this guy are going to be tech focused, right? Because he works at Digital Foundry. So obviously they're going to prefer the Xbox in terms of pure specs, I guess. I just thought I think a lot of this is reflective of the presentation and not actually a side-by-side comparison of the consoles, Very reactionary based on the way that was handled. Second to last thing, Daniel Ahmad, who is also somebody on Twitter who breaks video game news, is a great follow. I think this is a sentiment he has for people who are level-minded on this whole thing. The main takeaway for me is both next-gen consoles offer significant advancements in terms of power and features with ray tracing, SSD, and 3D audio. The next and more important conversation to have is about the games, services, ecosystem, pricing, and user experience. Content is always king, but services and ecosystems are going to be extremely important in the transition from this generation to the next. Where are the biggest games? Which ecosystem is the most affordable to transition to? Which services offer the best value? Services such as Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live Gold, PS Now, etc. are going to be what people talk about alongside the games themselves. Retaining your current games, friends lists, overall ecosystem, cross-play and cross-save makes things more interesting too. So he's basically saying what we all know. It's like not just based on the pure power numbers. What are the games? But on top of that, what are the services they're providing, the value to the customers, the entry point price, all of that stuff, right? There's a lot more left to know in terms of how things are going to shake out with the console war. Yeah. Lastly, I wanted to go back to John Linneman from Digital Foundry. The SSD for the PlayStation is really impressive, but there are some specifics that people should know about that he kind of clarified. So, He stated, first off, the craziest thing about PlayStation 5 is the speed of the SSD. 5.5 gigabytes per second is just the start. There is a lot of custom silicon in there to ensure that the system isn't bottlenecked in other areas. It's really fast on paper, a lot faster than Xbox Series X even, which we know because the speed there was 2.4, right?
Yep.
But somebody came and asked him, so other devices aren't going to be able to match those speeds, that being the SSD drives, right? And you can assume that games running on the PS5 will want to push the envelope as far as possible or get capped for multi-platform releases. And John responds, sure, only first-party games will truly utilize those speeds, but multi-platform games are still going to be made with SSD in mind. He said, I mean, we went from 500 to 100 megabits a second last gen to 2.4 gig and 5.5 gigs a second. That's a massive leap. So he's basically saying there, like, the first-party games on Sony are going to benefit from this. The multi-platform stuff, not so much. But even at the base, it's a huge leap from last gen.
That and to like just touch on that for just a second, it is something that is, if Sony gets the marketplace again this generation, which only time will tell, then third-party, and depending on how easy this thing is to code for, that's another thing that only time will tell. Then third parties will be coding for this for the PlayStation Mind, and then you will see a big difference between these two consoles.
Yeah, that's kind of like the good question to ask. I mean, it remind us all, like at the end of the day, all these numbers and everything of like, okay, but what does that really mean? Like what does that mean for the games? Like, what are we gonna see, right?
Yeah.
Like how meaningful are all these numbers and the differences between them, from the SSD speeds to the CPU and GPU power? It's like what kind of differences is that actually going to translate to? Like, obviously in all the cases, like the first party studios are going to be able to do more when they only are developing for the one box, right?
Yeah.
And for third parties, it's probably a lot of the time they're going to be, developing for like the lower common denominator in each scenario of transfer speed versus graphical power. So I don't know how much difference all this really makes in the actual product at the end of the day.
Well, that's the thing, right, is that if Xbox becomes a market leader, opposite to what Joseph was saying, is that if it's the 2.4 they have to reach, not the 5.5 that they need to focus on, I doubt developers will want to put in the extra work when they're not the market leader. You know what I mean? Because to this next tweet I'm going to get to, somebody said, but this won't translate into anything except for maybe slightly faster first-party games on PlayStation, right? The SSD speed for both consoles is more than enough for games. And John Lineman replied, absolutely, not saying otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and to Joseph's point, it's like it depends on, is it easier to develop for? Is it the market leader? What's going to happen there? Do developers... You can take advantage of that stuff, but outside of first-party developers, will they see a need to do that, or can they just go with the baseline, right? How much work is involved there?
Right.
The last tweet I wanted to get to here, I think it's the last tweet. Yeah, this is the last tweet. Somebody said, also, what are your thoughts on the variable clock speeds versus the static clock speeds in the Xbox Series X? This was like one of the main differences, right, between the consoles. He said, I personally think Microsoft is right on the money about the console experience being tied to 100% predictable results. And John Linneman replied, PS5 is predictable as well, but it forces developers to make choices that won't be necessary on Series X. I think fixed clocks are a better choice in this case, but we'll see how it goes. So that's interesting. Him saying that developers will need to make choices on the PS5 when they won't really have to make those choices on the Xbox. So it's really weird, the difference there. And I think the main thing for PlayStation, because according to, obviously this is just one man from Digital Foundry, but according to him, the fact that it seems, based on that quote, it'll be easier for developers on the Xbox Series X. I think it'll be up to those first-party Sony developers, who we know are more than capable of delivering what you can get from that transfer speed and showing that it is worth the time for third-party partners, right? I think they're the ones that need to sell it to everybody else to be like, yeah, you need to make these choices, but trust me, it's worth it. I think it's cool there that there's some more explanation as to what you get from variable clock speeds and static. And, it's funny because the 12 teraflops are bigger than the 10 teraflops, right? In the same way that the 5.5 transfer speed is larger than the 2.4. But at the end of the day, what do each of those numbers really even mean, and will it matter for both sides?
Exactly.
You know. So
well, that's the thing that I think everybody's kind of losing touch on. We're looking at a goddamn spreadsheet, and we're just like, okay, cool. We see all these numbers, we see algorithms, whatever the hell. We're seeing Matrix.
As Cerny said, we're in the Matrix.
Yeah, like, and by the way, we're in a simulation. Like, but chances are we need to see the games. And listen, I can say the same for Microsoft as well. Cool, State of Decay, I've seen this game already. Show me something I haven't. Show me Halo Infinite running, right? We're seeing a lot of past games, old games running on new tech. That's not impressing me much. Show me something new.
The only thing we've seen is Hellblade, and there was no gameplay. It was still visually awesome, but obviously we didn't see gameplay, right?
We didn't see
the only PlayStation thing. Sorry, the only PlayStation thing we've seen is what's that launch title? The one that's launch exclusive.
God something.
Melee slasher looter.
Godfall. Yeah.
Godfall. That's the only PS5 gameplay we've seen so far, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to see the games for both
sides.
To
me, at the end of the day as well, none of this is actually going to matter. Like we've been stating that all night long, but
it's still fun to talk about.
What I'm trying to get here is none of this really matters. Like all the clock speeds, the teraflops, the whatever the hell we're gonna talk about, because at the end of the day, no one has a TV that is 8K compatible, right?
Right.
Or sorry, that is an 8K
120
TV.
FPS.
Yeah, no one has that hardware in the house. Most people don't. The statistic that one of the panelists pulled out yesterday was the fact that 31% of people own a 4K TV in their house. So at the end of the day, the flops don't matter right now. It'll matter 5 years out from now, 6 years out from now, but by that time there will be another shiny box or maybe a floating cube that we call Jared, and it talks to us.
It's kind of like we're in that same spring-summer period where, like, the NFL draft is looming and everyone's comparing, like, people's college stats or, like, combine numbers in their workouts. Not actually watching plays or whatever, but just looking at stats.
They're looking at how high can this guy jump. Oh, he can play football.
Exactly, yeah. Where it's like, all right, it's fun to talk about because we have nothing else for right now, right? But what really matters is like, okay, well, what's that dude doing on the field come fall, right?
That's why, like, to the point we talked about earlier that Joseph first brought up, one of the coolest things is the older games getting added benefits with the new consoles. Well, at least on Xbox's side, we know about that so far. PlayStation hasn't really gone into it. But, like, that's the thing is, like, who cares about 8K? Will these old games I have trouble looking at look good? Can I play them and not squint my eyes? Normally we'd go into what we've been playing. We will real quick, but we've gone quite a long time, so I don't want to go too involved in it. Real quick, I'll say, big news week, a lot to talk about, and I'm glad we had Joseph on, who hosts a PlayStation podcast, so he was able to give a really good sense of insight on the topic. So real quick, because of all the current events with coronavirus, I didn't have a whole lot of time to play games. Not that I was in like any worry or danger. It was just like getting adjusted to the current situation. The only thing I was really able to play is Warzone. Hopped into a couple more matches. Quick thoughts again from added on to what I said last week. I really like Call of Duty's gameplay. I still think that this game has too quick of a TTK to really get into it the way I can with Apex Legends personally. But that's Call of Duty, and it's hard to balance, and it's a tough thing. That's my only downside to it. But on the bright side, I do think Gulag is an interesting fix to that issue where you do get a second chance to get into the match, which is original to this Battle Royale. But enjoying it. They added solo mode, which I'm super thankful for. I think they were planning on adding that at a later date. Yeah, but because of the current situation, I think they pushed it live. There was some weird PUBG stuff the first day it came out where, like, textures weren't really loading all that well, which is weird for a Call of Duty game because normally they're very polished. But I do think that was a side effect of them pushing it early, but I'm glad they did. And yeah, it's pretty much the only thing I got to play this week. Was shiny hunting some Pokemon as usual, but who wants to hear about that? Joseph, let us know. You said you've been playing Warzone, right?
Yeah, man, I've been playing a lot of Warzone. But Plunder mode in particular.
Ooh, interesting. I'm more of a BR guy. I didn't touch Plunder at all.
Here's the thing. I'm more of a BR guy, but the team that I run with, listen. Luke Lord, the Xbox expansion pass. He's a great man. You should get him on the show. He's a great personality. Insipid Ghost on Twitter. He sucks at video games. He is our driver, and he drives us places. Our good friend Kev, who is ironically shares the same name of a PlayStation mascot, technically. Yeah.
Crash Bandicoot?
Spyro.
No.
Cool name.
No, his name's Kevin Butler. And
Kevin Butler.
he, unfortunate soul, loves Xbox. Anyway, not the point here. He's a decent shot, but I'm here carrying them, right? On my shoulders, on my back. It hurts. Plunder mode is a great alternative to the Battle Royale genre. And I call it genre now because Plunder very much takes the same 150 people in a map, right? Sorry, got weird. I think I'm dying. Don't worry, I'm fine. 150 people in the map. You're all fighting for instead of kills. The twist is, what do you do a lot in a BR game? You're looting a shit ton. So the whole point is getting more money than the other guy. And the person that first reaches 1 million, then the whole game cash is almost doubled. I think it's 1.5. And the person with the most cash at the end of the 30-minute round, or whoever gets a million, wins. We won 2 matches. It is a ton of fun. There is a lot of strategy involved with Plunder. It's very different. It's a very different mindset, and there's a lot of risk reward that I'm really digging out of it. So, Plunder mode, really great. I'm really liking Call of Duty Warzone. I think it's a great addition, but at the end of the day, the one that remains supreme is Apex Legends. I love it so much.
Oh, my heart skipped a beat. I thought you were going to say Fortnite. We're an anti-Fortnite household here at Control Interests.
I used to mess with Fortnite. I have over 200 plus wins in that game, easy. But Apex is my jam. It's my bread and my butter.
Yeah, Dom and I fall in the same camp of when it comes to shooters, we like the focus to be on gun skill. And in Fortnite, if somebody's just a better builder, they're gonna beat you. You know what I mean? And that's just an aspect of
and it sucks because the shooting's so good as well.
Anything else you wanted to mention before Dom lets us know what he's been playing? Joseph?
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Again,
Okay.
I got a troubling text. My apologies.
No problem. I just said, is there anything else you wanted to mention before Dom lets us know what he's been playing?
Dom, let us know what you've been playing. Enough about me. It's not important.
A shit ton of this little Norman Reedus game, Hideo Kojima game rather, called Death Stranding. Enough so that I'm finally done with it. After 46 hours, I think it was clocked.
I spent 63.
You know, it shows you your stats at the end, right? And I did 2 side quests the whole game.
Wow.
At the beginning, I did a couple, and then I was like, eventually I started getting really into the main story, and I just was like, I'm just doing this story, and that's what I want to see. And so I just mainlined it, and it still took that long. It's a long-ass game, dude. But I talked about it a lot the past couple weeks. I really enjoyed it. The ending was pretty cool. A bit too abstract and sci-fi for my taste. It reminded me a bit of... Everyone was talking about that Oscar Isaac movie, Annihilation.
Okay.
A few years ago, and like, oh, it's so cool.
Natalie
I watched
Portman
that.
film. Excuse you.
Yes. That's wow. I gotta look at myself in the mirror after that. I forgot her name, and I was thinking
He's
of
like
Oscar
the
Isaac.
side character that disappears in the first 10 minutes of that film. It's funny.
Yeah, but he's the one that I was thinking of from that movie. I don't know. Maybe
Great actor.
Never mind.
Love him. But yeah.
Anyway, that movie was it was cool, and there was a lot of cool stuff going on. But when it got into the ending and explaining what exactly was going on, it was so abstract and super deep sci-fi that I just kind of lost it. And I'm like, I don't know if I get it. Death Stranding had a little bit of that going on, where I'm like, okay. And the ending is so full of exposition that I'm like,
it's literally an hour and a 30-minute movie. The problem with Death Stranding, it's my game of the year. And I think 2019 was a great year for video games. I liked it for the moment-to-moment gameplay. It's serene. It's something you lose yourself in. Environment's gorgeous. Sound design. Ooh, chef's kiss. But the story kind of It's Kojima, so he's up his own ass. And at the same exact time, you know the end of Rise of Skywalker?
Of course.
Okay. I love that movie because it's Star Wars and I'm a simple soul. But they do something that I call very Kojima, where the Emperor explains his motives and explains what he's doing, and somehow that makes it happen. Right? It's pretty much like something needed to happen for this to happen, so I'm just going to explain how I got this, but I'm not going to show you. And that's a lot of what Death Stranding is explaining something while it's happening to justify why it's happening.
Which it breaks the number one rule of storytelling.
Yeah, and
Show,
he does
tell.
it a lot, but for some reason we give it a pass because he's Kojima. To me, yeah, like you're right. Like the story loses it for me, but man, that music, that sound design, that gameplay.
The music, the music especially. Those moments where like you're closing in on a delivery, like a longer one, right? And then a song kicks up.
Yep.
And it's always the perfect song.
It's on my Spotify. It's always my number one.
It's just, when that music hits, especially like towards like when you're running in the last mile or whatever, it just feels right. Everything's cool.
Somebody needs to make a top 10 video game abstract endings. I think one would probably be Inside, and according to you guys, Death Stranding would probably be in the mix there too.
Oh yeah.
Inside has a very abstract ending, but it's not super sci-fi. It's very simple, artistic, so it kind of works for it. But that's been this week's show. Before we go, Joseph, please let the people know where they can find you on the internet.
Sure. So first, you can find me over at Twitter at MrBadBit, or you can follow the Trophy Room on Twitter at PS Trophy Room. I have a YouTube channel called BadBit Games where I talk about all game news, reviews, and unboxings. The next video that you are seeing from me, I am unboxing the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 1080 Ti. Wait for it. Cyberpunk 2077 limited edition.
I thought you were going to say it, and then you did say it.
It's beautiful. It is heavy as shit, and I shot it with a Nerf gun. It's fantastic. Check that video out. Can't wait for people to get upset at me about that.
Legit, I'm checking this out right now.
It's not up yet. But by the time this podcast is, don't worry, it will be. Again, follow me at MrBadBit. That's where you'll find it. And then you can follow the Trophy Room, a PlayStation podcast made by the players for the players. It's also on YouTube at BadBit Games, but it's also, you can find it on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, wherever you get an RSS feed. That's probably there. Please rate us 5 stars. Really helps the show out. We're at 63. If we get 6 more reviews, we become super cool.
It's awesome. I want to have you on more often. Like I said, now with only the 2 of us, we try to have guests on almost every week because conversations gel better with 3 people. And, you have such a stranglehold on the PlayStation ecosystem that it's cool to have you on, especially like this week, right? Where it just so happened we actually made the plans before all of this happened, and then it just kind of fell in our lap. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it's so weird how that happens, and it's so weird that, like, you say stranglehold. I constantly try to find PlayStation people for my show, but I end up getting Xbox, Nintendo people, PC people, because it's just a better conversation because we're not all circle jerking and we're not all, in agreements. We're having, like, awesome dialogue. And it's also really hard to find positive PlayStation people. So if you guys find some, let me know because it's hard out here, man. It's only me, Beyond, and P.S. I love you. That's it.
Yeah, well, I launched my PlayStation 4 with a catapult after they announced Horizon was coming to PC.
Oh, God. Anyways, before we get into that, thank you guys for listening. If you want to, please follow us on Twitter at CTRLINT. That's Controlled Interest Abbreviated. Independently, you can follow me at Jared _. Yep, still have the underscore. You can follow Dom at Dom's Oreos. Yep, he loves those cookies. If you can, please go over, like Joseph said earlier, to iTunes. Follow us. Leave us a review. It helps. 5 stars is preferred. If you don't like to listen on iTunes, we're also on Spotify finally. That approval process took a bit, but it finally happened. So thank you, Spotify gods, for allowing us to be on your platform. If you want to go over to YouTube, search Controlled Interest, will pop right up. If you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell notification so you know when we upload a new video, because the sub boxes are fickle and you can't trust them on YouTube. Can't trust those sub boxes. It's true. And that's pretty much it. Catch you guys next week when we'll hopefully have another guest. See you then. Bye.